So Corey, how did you do on your action items?
Pretty terrible. So, Mike, I've been trying to diagnose why I'm so bad at action items. And I think it's because I have these like grand visions for these action items. And then I roll into, we stop recording, and the rest of life hits me like a gigantic wave crashing into me. Be that family or the next book or my job or whatever it might be, right? I get crashed on this. And then I go, I didn't even know I had action items and they just go away. So I need a better system. And this is not just for bookworm action items. This is for life more generally. I need a better system, but not it isn't the tool, right? I know you talk about this all the time on Focused and different places. Like the tool doesn't matter. I've tried paper, I've tried this app, I've tried that app, I've tried this other thing. So that's why I say I need a better system. And where it comes down to it is I need a system that I actually care about. And that like when I write something in there and then it pops up a reminder or a notification, I actually pay attention to it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it's like, so there is a fundamental disconnect. And it's not that I don't care. It's not that I don't want to map out a strategic listening plan, or it's not that I don't want to ask, how do I put others first today? It's a matter of, I need a better system that actually encourages me to do that and to stay on top of it and to continually stay on top of it. So how did I do on mapping out a strategic listening plan? I did not map out a strategic listening plan. How did I do on how did I put others first? I'll tell you, I probably thought about this 2 times, maybe 3 times, but I definitely did not think like about it every day or regularly enough as I wanted to in there. So that is my mini little diatribe on action items. How did you do, Mike?
50%. But let me back up just a second here because you mentioned a system. And I guess this is a good spot to mention that I am working on a system, not just for action items, for running your entire life out of Obsidian. So happy to give you a beta version of that if you think it could be helpful for anyone else who is interested in this sort of thing. I will create a landing page where you can go put in your email, and I'm getting ready to launch it in the next like month or so. So if you fill out that form, I'll make sure that you get the email as soon as it's available and you get the option at the best price. But basically what I'm doing is I'm taking everything I do inside of Obsidian, making a pre-made vault with pre-configured plugins and a whole bunch of dashboards. That's the thing that really stands out to me is like the way that my action items get done is I put those into Obsidian and then they show up on these lists in this Canvas dashboard that I've created. I think I probably showed you a screenshot of this at one point.
I saw a screenshot, I think, in one of your newsletters.
Okay.
Right? And before you keep going, let me tell everybody, I did not do this on purpose.
You did not.
Made the statement that I made knowing that Mike is the focused guy. I had no idea that he had this like whole, well, I have this canned system that's going to come right at you. I mean, I've heard him talk about it before, but I was not, trust me, this was not like some sneaky mechanism for him to talk about his thing. So, but I'm interested. Keep going.
Okay. I'm terrible at self-promotion, so I don't like talking about it. But basically, yeah, so it started with me building my task dashboard in Obsidian where I've got all these colored lists for things that are due today, things that are on the back burner, things that I'm waiting for someone to get back to me on, things I need to clarify, things that are due the next week. I have an inbox, which is basically things that haven't been processed, so they don't have a date, they don't have a tag. And I basically just kind of thought through how does this system work? What are the rules that I'm playing by as I'm putting things in here? And then I found that if you just capture tasks to a single list, it'll show up in these, in a single note, it'll show up on these lists if it has the right metadata. So I started building more dashboards, and now I've got them for all of my daily questions, all of my journal entries. I mean, if you've been following my YouTube channel at all, I've been talking a lot about this stuff, the quote books thing, where it's got a special beta plugin, formats the query a certain way so you can see the source, and then also Command F, you can find whatever quote you're looking for. I started showing that to people in my community, and they're like, hey, this is cool. I'd be interested in trying this. And so I've been working on this Pro Vault for several months now, and I'm building all the documentation. So it's the dashboards and things, but also a whole bunch of lessons on this is how you use it. There's 40 different workflows that I've built into it. And each one has a summary at the top where if you don't care about the philosophy, just press this keyboard shortcut to do this, then do this, then do this. But but I want people to understand how it works. And I don't want it to be like a turnkey system. I want people to customize it, make it their own. So below that, screenshots, and I'm working on videos where it's like, this is everything that goes into why I'm doing it this way. So it's essentially a PKM course, but also inside of a done for you vault that has all of the stuff pre-configured. And there'll be two versions. One will have all the how-tos. One will just be the blank one. So you can just open it up and you're off to the races. So yeah, I think maybe this could help you with your action item problem if you're interested in Obsidian. I know you've been like Obsidian curious in the past. I don't know how invested you are into it.
Not enough to like say I don't like it, but it's just not enough to say I use it like every day. Like it's not definitely not the first thing I open when I open my computer up.
Well, I mean, if you're not doing task management in Obsidian already, then maybe it's not going to work for you, but I don't know. If you want it, let me know.
Well, I think if nothing else, it'd be fun to play around with it and talk about in a pro show, right? I mean,
yep.
It's like, Mike, I messed around with your vault, and let me tell you all the things that I liked and all the things that I didn't like.
That's fair.
Yeah.
All right. So yeah, there's that. And then as far as my action items go, I had 2 of them. So one was find something hard to do. I survived a trip to London. Does that count?
That does count. That does count.
That was not the intention. I joke about that because we just talked about that for the pro show. So if you want to find out more about my trip to London, then we talked about it for about 20 minutes before this, and you can find out more about the pro show at patreon.com/bookwormfm. The one I did succeed at was finding someone to praise weekly. And I guess you could say that this isn't really done. Like I don't have a system for this, but I have been doing it. And it really hasn't been specifically, I'm picking someone to praise them for something specific that they did. It's more just sending an encouraging note to somebody, which I think is the way I framed it last time. If my memory serves, that's really what I was after. And that part has stuck so far. So not enough to say that, oh yeah, this is ingrained and it's now a habit, but at least enough to give it a green check mark instead of a red X.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm in this show enough now, and I don't know if I've asked this question or not before. So if I've asked this question, just tell me to stop. What is the point of action items, and what was the original point of action items, and what should the future of action items look like? Or is this something question we should talk about? Is this something we should talk about it on a different thing, and we should get to the book because we're already a bunch of minutes into recording?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I guess if you have feedback for the action items and what you think we should do with them, then let us know. But the original intention was we read these books, and what's the point of reading the books? It's to do something with what we have read. So jot down the things that we want to do based on the books that we have read. And then in theory, because we have shared these publicly, we don't want to look like a fool next episode and not do them. But
so that's where I fall down, is because I don't take me not doing it as looking like a fool, which maybe I should. Maybe that's a me problem, right?
Well,
I need to work on
that. I don't know. I mean, I've failed at this too. You mentioned you had a phrase. I forget how you said it, but what I heard in my head was that life has lifed you. Okay. Which happens, and I think it's fine if you're consistently finding, behind the scenes in front of everybody. I guess here, if you are finding, Cory, that you think the action items are not serving a purpose in the future, we can definitely think about getting rid of them.
No, it's more a matter of like I want a longer term way to track.
That's fair.
You know what I mean? Like, so, okay, I write them down, and I mean, I think maybe it's just I need to go back through the episodes and write down all my action items, and then I don't need to follow up on them by the next show. But it's like if I can say within 6 months I'm at 80%, right? I've hit 80% of my action items. Okay, like I like that. I like that metric. That seems like a realistic metric for me. I don't know if it's true or not, but it's like that's almost what I want, because when I make the action items, I want to do them, but then life lifes me. And and it's like, will I ever get back to that? Because if not, I mean, what are we reading all these books for? Like, other than just the general like lifting up your base knowledge, which we're going to talk about that later with a David Brooks quote. Okay, so maybe that's something I need to do with your vault system that you share with me. I need to figure out a way to track all the action items
Could
long
be.
term.
We'll work on this. We've done different things in the past where we've tried to, for example, share the action items publicly. That just ended up being too much maintenance.
Yeah.
But I don't mind pinging you and being like, hey, just so you know, we're recording on this a couple of days, and you said you were going to do this. So,
Well, and what it might be is you and I schedule, right? We calendar like a follow-up show or something like every 6 months, and we're like, okay, let's look back at our action items and how many of them have we actually
sure.
tried to do, and I think that'd be a fun like additional show.
All right. I'm game.
All right, cool. Man, that was fun. Okay.
All right. Let's talk about today's book. Today's book is Hidden Genius by Polina Marinova Pompliano, I believe is how you say it. And to be honest, I had not heard of this book prior to hearing her as a guest on one of my new favorite podcasts, which is Good Work by Barrett Brooks. Do you know who Barrett Brooks is?
I know of Barrett Brooks. I don't know much about.
Okay. So Barrett Brooks is the former second in command at ConvertKit and was basically the operations guy when he was there. And he left a couple of years ago. He's still a part owner in the company, but now he is basically a consultant for smaller businesses to help them dial in their business operations. And he started a podcast called Good Work, which has quickly become one of my favorites, in part because I find the whole concept of business operations to be fascinating. So if you're hearing me describe that and you think that sounds boring, like don't bother with this podcast. You're not going to like it.
Okay.
But I think he does a really good job. He interviews a lot of interesting people, and he's one of the best interviewers that I've heard. It's not your standard interviews. He is very articulate, very intelligent in the way that he frames his questions. The conversations that come up as a result end up always being great, in my opinion. So he was interviewing Polina Marinova Pompliano on his podcast, and that's how I found out about this book, Hidden Genius, which I'm not quite sure how to classify this book. There's an introduction and a conclusion, and then 10 separate chapters. So there's not like sections associated with this, which is kind of nice, actually. The first chapter, Unleashing Your Creative Potential. Second chapter, Mastering Mental Toughness. And then as you go, you get into leadership type topics, taking risk in times of uncertainty, clarifying your thinking, optimizing your content diet. I mean, it has an arc to it, but it's very wide ranging. And also, I guess just about the book in general here before we get into the specifics, it is definitely not written as an I am the guru and you should listen to what I say type of narrative. A lot of the chapters are constructed of a lot of the ideas that she has picked up from other people, other places. But it's also not just a restating of other people's ideas. She does a great job sprinkling, in my opinion, sprinkling in her own experiences and stories along with what she shares. But all that to say, it's a little bit different type of book. There's still a lot of great information in here, but it's packaged in the form of like a lot of profiles and quotes. Several of the pages are just a giant quote by one of the people in the profiles that she talks about. And what was your first impressions when you picked this one up?
Yeah, so you did a good job giving the overview. It's a tough book, like you were doing, to try to like wrap your head around until you've thought about it a little while. I think the tagline, or like what is it after the colon, right? So you have a title, it's Hidden Genius, and then colon, whatever the subtitle is, or whatever you want to call that. The secret ways of thinking that power the world's most successful people. I think that actually does a really good job in this book. That what it's going to give you is it's going to give you these 10 different ways of thinking, or 10 different ideas that power. I don't like the world's most, but I like successful people. Like if you would have just gone secret ways of thinking that power successful people. I think that'd be good. And that's the way I broke down the 10 chapters is like, here's an idea. It's a really interesting idea. Here's another idea. It's a really interesting idea. And where does it come from? I think she does a good job explaining how her like writing trajectory, like in 2020, she quits her job and then starts the Profile, right, which is this newsletter about, it's like profiling people. And you can easily see how she goes from there to writing this book. This book is not just, she could have written this book in terms of like, here are the 10 best profiles and what I learned from those profiles. And she didn't do that. She kind of did what in like the research world, she did all these profiles and then said, what is the key theme? And then you can see how she created this book. I thought that was a good way to do it. And we'll talk about the 10 different things, but overall, like I think she organized it. It's organized well and it's clear, very clear.
Yeah, you were talking about the world's most successful people, and I actually don't mind that descriptor there. I get why, just taken out of context, that sounds kind of grandiose and maybe sets creates a picture of a tone for this book that's not really there, in my opinion. But also, one of the things that gave some credibility to this book when I was looking at it before I bought it is that there's a blurb on the front cover by James Clear.
I knew you were gonna. I knew you were going to be excited about the James Clear stuff that's in here.
Yeah, to be honest, Atomic Habits is a great book, but I don't think it's even my favorite book on the topic of habits. That would probably be Tiny Habits by B.J. Fogg. But I do think that James Clear does a great job in Atomic Habits. And I also think that it's kind of cool to see his career trajectory, because I knew of him. I never actually met him, but I knew of him when I was working with Asian Efficiency. And that was obviously long before he wrote the book, and he was starting a blog and trying to write consistently and build this email newsletter, which now he's probably got one of the biggest newsletters on the planet. But, before he was a big deal, he was the guy who was hungry to learn and get better. Yeah. And I appreciate that about him. I actually got to interview him for the Productivity Show back in the day. That was a fun interview.
Nice.
Just seems like a very genuine, authentic person, in my opinion. And those are the people that I like to surround myself with and the people I like to listen to.
Yeah.
So if he is saying that this is a good book, that does carry a little bit of weight for me,
Yeah.
But not just because it's Atomic Habits, and that's been at the top of the bestsellers list for so long.
Well, and if you like the books that are covered on Bookworm, this book fits right in the center of that. Like a lot of the referenced people in this book are authors that have either been previously talked about, their books have been read, and we've talked about them previously on the podcast. So I'm talking James Clear, Morgan Housel. I mean, there's quite a few. I'm sure I'm forgetting a bunch of other ones, but it's like there's quite a few here that we've covered their books, or Mike and Joe covered their books before I came on the show. So this fits right in the wheelhouse of what we do, basically every other week.
Yep, absolutely. You will find as you go through it that some of the ideas that she's referencing in these other books, there's a whole lot more to them, obviously, than she's going to be able to get into in the context that she has. But we should probably just dive into the book here. So let's start with the introduction, which is the first section here. And a couple things to call out in this first section. For me, she kind of frames it through the lens of people-focused learning. And she's got this emphasis on storytelling, which I think is really cool. And essentially what she's saying is that you can pick up information, but you remember it more, and it has more impact a lot of times when there's a story attached to it. So people-focused learning specifically is the notion that people and their stories are at the center of any learning pursuit. And I've heard about this, the power of story and why stories are important previously, but something about the way that she framed it here at the introduction made it click for me.
Mm-hmm.
So this isn't laying the foundation for the whole concept of hidden genius. She's just kind of talking about, this is what I'm going to do throughout the rest of the book, which I thought was kind of interesting.
Yeah, and I like how she frames it in terms of, we're not idolizing these people. So we're not putting them on this overly grandiose pedestal. What we're doing is basically we're trying to say there's something about them, or some way that they think, or something they've talked about at some point, and that's interesting, and let's learn from that, which I like a lot. I can also tell you that from the educator in me says it's very, very true in terms of stories have like a huge impact when you're trying to teach somebody something. So you'll have a class where what we do, we came in all day and we just delivered content, right? It's fact, definition, fact, equation, try an example, whatever it is. And then you'll have other classes where like it's story this, story that, add fact, add definition, add a showed use of the formula within a context. And the students get way more out of it if you put it into context through stories, if you put it into context through like design problems and those type of things. So I was on board, right? When I read the introduction, I was like, yep, this is going to be a good way to think about this. And I'm also a social psychologist, a social science researcher. So I was in, right when she said about we're going to learn from other people. I was like, yeah, let's do this. So
cool. All right. So the first chapter 1 is unleashing your creative potential. She's starting off with a topic that is very important, inspiring, and intriguing to me. The whole idea of creativity has always kind of fascinated me. For those who know my story, at one point I said, I guess I'm just not creative. I thought I didn't have the gene. And I looked at what other people could make, and I was like, that's amazing. They make it look so easy and effortless. I obviously can't do what they do. And I had to kind of learn that creativity is a process. It's a system. And kind of started with Steal Like an Artist by Austin Kleon, where he's talking about if you create something new, you're really just connecting dots in ways that haven't been connected before. And that really stuck with me, and I've been trying to collect better dots for years. I've noticed through the process that when I collect better dots, it's easier to create things. So just get better inputs, the outputs get better regardless. But then as you continue to think about this, obviously the next step is the process. And that, I think, is kind of what she's talking about here. Creativity is a skill. It can be learned. There's different ways to approach this. I just wrote a newsletter as we record this on my framework for this, just trying to make sense of it in my own head on the creativity flywheel. So I'll put a link to that in the show notes for people who are interested in that sort of thing. We don't need to talk through all that today. We'll focus on the book here. But all that to say that I think she does a good job of talking about the key elements of creativity. One of the things that I like that she brought up was that in the 1500s, Leonardo da Vinci used a process called connecting the unconnected, which ties into what I was talking about with Steal Like an Artist and connecting these dots. I mean, they're using a little bit different terminology to describe this, but also they're talking about the same things. And by describing it a different way, it clicks in my head a little bit better. I understand it a little bit more fully. And the story that she shares with this, which I'd never heard before, was kind of interesting. How Leonardo was standing by a well, and then he noticed that when a stone hit the water at the moment, he noticed a stone hitting the water the moment that a bell went off at a nearby church tower. And he saw that the stone caused these circles that spread until they disappeared. And then he kind of translated the context, and he's like, oh, that's probably what's happening with the sound waves from the bell, which I think is kind of cool. I mean, there's so much we could talk about with this. Just one highlight, I guess, from all the places my brain is racing right now. I talk about connecting notes in Obsidian a lot in the videos that I make and stuff like that. And one of the questions I get asked all the time is, well, should I have separate vaults for this, that, and the other thing? And I'm always like, no, because I like the fact that I can take something from one domain and connect it and apply the concept to something in a totally different domain.
Yeah.
So I can see a lot of overlap with some of the stories that she shares with us and my whole approach to creativity. She also talks about the chef and the cook. Maybe this is a place for some conversation here, where a chef is someone who creates recipes, a cook is someone who follows them. And I think that there's probably a different times that we should be in cook versus chef modes, regardless of how creative we think we are, the type of work that we do.
I recently got to interact with a guy who is the chef, as she would describe it. And his job is to create the menu for different restaurants, right? And like, so what's he do? He basically thinks about what flavor combinations would go together well, and then what would people want to buy, and how would they want to, put plates together. And then he develops that for like 3 different restaurants. And it's like, that's his job. He doesn't actually cook any of the food, on the nightly basis. His job is to make the new cool dish at the menu or on the menu, and to develop that new thing. You talked about kind of making the connections within Obsidian. Your episode, I'm not the whole way through it right now, but your episode interviewing Bob Dotto on Focused was really, really good. Like, cause I forget whether it was the second or the third layer, so you can correct me where it was, but okay, we put in these notes and they're just single ideas. And if we don't go back in and we don't think about how these notes connect to the other notes, we're missing it. Like we're actually missing what we're doing. It's not it's almost like the ingestion of ideas is table stakes. We have to do that. But if we do that and we don't do the second layer where we try to connect things and write these maps of content, or I forget what it was called in Dotto's system. What did he call the one where you try to put things together?
Well, he's got a very Zettelkasten approach. I forget the specific terms that he uses. I've got a mind node for this. I'd be actually I almost picked that book as the next book for Bookworm, but I wasn't sure you would actually be interested in it. So,
oh yeah,
if your game,
yeah, I'm totally interested in it.
All right.
So yeah, but it's like that. That's that idea. Is this creativity isn't just the capturing of things or the coming up with the good idea. It's also the combining different things. When we teach different entrepreneurship classes, one of the activities we'd take them through is we would give them 15 or 20 different existing things. And we'd say, okay, you're only allowed to create ideas with these 15 or 20 things, but you have to smush them together. Right? And you can smush 2 of them together. You can smush 15 of them together, whatever it is. And we had some really cool ideas come out of it. Like one of them that I believe is still a company, but it's called Card Isle. And they were like, we want to be like the red box of greeting cards. So what they did was they smushed together this idea of red box having this little kiosk, that sits in the middle of your store, and then the greeting card aisle. And it's like, how can we smush those two things together? So I really liked, that idea, this idea of like combinatorials or combining different things into ideas. The key takeaway I have from this chapter basically is these 3 characteristics, right? Original creators have 3 characteristics. They have a unique point of view. They're confident they can achieve their goal, and then they're willing to fail spectacularly. And I was like, man, that's a really good way to do this, because if you think about it, like that's a lot of the people I like to watch on YouTube or I like to listen to. It's like they do have a good idea, a good point of view. That's why I cared about listening to them. 2, they do it well, or they've done the work, or they've practiced, to do it well. And then 3, right, there's a good chance that it's going to fail. I kind of wish that more of them would be willing to fail more and to throw those things out there and be like, hey, that thing we did 2 weeks ago, it was not good. And we learned a lot from the fact that it wasn't good, and we're not going to do that anymore. Because I just think there's a creative honesty in that we were trying a thing and it just didn't go the way we thought it was going to go. So that was my big takeaway from that section were those 3 points, those 3 unique characteristics.
I like that term, creative honesty. Never heard it framed that way, but yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
You do something with your YouTube channel and then come back the next video and be like, nope, just didn't work. Like that was not very good. And I put it out there and feedback says it's not very good and I don't think it's very good. And everybody would just go, oh yeah, Okay, that makes sense. Now, if you do that a lot, right, we're going to stop watching, right? Like, people are going to stop caring and stop paying attention. But if you do it every so often because you were trying that new thing on the front edge, I think it's awesome.
Yeah, you're kind of hitting on one of the struggles I have with making the stuff for YouTube. And I mentioned the Pro Vault earlier, but I don't want to put something out there that isn't tested, that I haven't used for a long time. And so it's hard for me to do that because I feel like, well, I've only been using this for 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, 2 years. But at this point, at some point it is battle tested enough, but I have trouble saying that publicly because I feel like the minute that you put it out there, you are endorsing this as essentially a bulletproof system, even if you're not really saying that.
Yeah.
So interesting. All right. Ready to go on to the next one?
I am.
All right. So chapter 2 is Mastering Mental Toughness. And the main character from the story of this one is David Goggins. Excellent choice.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know?
An excellent choice.
Yeah. So you're familiar with David Goggins.
Have you read many of his books?
Not many. I've read Can't Hurt Me, and that's enough.
Yeah. Okay.
That was difficult to get through.
Yeah.
Number one, it's a very emotional and somewhat disturbing story that he tells from his life.
Yes.
And then the other thing is just there is so much language.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing, or the thing that gets me is what you said, but additionally, his mindset is so radical.
Yes.
It is so different than most of the world. And he'll say that. He will 100% say that to you. And if you ever listen to him be interviewed by anybody, he knows that he is not like other people, and that for him to live the life he wants to live, he cannot be like other people. So, but if you're going to pick a mental toughness example, man, Goggins is it's not a bad choice. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, probably him and Jocko are the other one that would fit here. And just by using those two names, there's going to be people who are familiar with them as characters and instantly bristle at the message. And what I want to call out in this book is that you don't have to be as crazy as David Goggins or Jocko Willink in order to benefit from some elements of the message that they share. So what Polina is doing a great job of in this chapter is distilling the core principles that just about anybody can apply. So if you were to summarize what the big takeaway is from David Goggins' story, essentially it's you're tougher than you think. And there's a couple things specifically that she calls out that he talks about. One is the 40% rule. And according to David Goggins, this is when your mind is telling you that you're done, you can't go any further. You've actually you're only about 40% done. I get the number mixed up, but it's below 50%. That's what I want to just clarify here. You've got a whole lot more in the tank than what you think you do. And then the other thing, which I think is maybe less useful, is the accountability mirror, which is something David Goggins uses where you face your insecurities in order to overcome them. And it makes sense if you know his story, because he grew up in a terrible situation, ran away from an abusive father, and was just struggling, was way overweight, was spraying cockroaches as like a pest control thing. And one day it was like, what am I doing with my life? And so the way that he got himself to change was look in the mirror, say, you're fat, you're lazy, you're a liar. What are you going to do about it? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I don't think I'm going to practice that, but I will. I do have an action item from this though. So one of the things that David Goggins has made a career of doing is finding something that, in his words, sucks and do it every day. So that's one of my action items, is do something that sucks every day.
Yeah. See, and as we were talking earlier, 6 months from now, I would love to follow up on that and be like, Mike, what are the sucky things that you've done every day? So just to kind of bring that around, that'd be fun.
Yeah. Well, to be honest, if I knew that I was going to be reporting on this 6 months from now, I may not do it. So I kind of selfishly like the fact that I can find something sucky and do that and check this as
Yeah.
done. It's like I've at least moved in that direction. Now, that's not the intention. I said it in the action item. I want to do something that sucks every day. But this doesn't have to be something that I really, really am not looking forward to doing and I've been procrastinating on for months. I view this as just doing something difficult. When I'm hungry and I forgot to pack a lunch, instead of going to get food, maybe I decide, no, you're just going to fast today, because I do that occasionally. That's really not that big a deal, but that's what this looks like for me. And it's really just small doses of this self-discipline or self-control, maybe. She talks about the 4 pillars of mental toughness here, which maybe we should talk about these before we get too far. Goal setting, mental visualization, positive self-talk, and then arousal control. So essentially, when you feel like doing something, you don't have to follow through and do that. You can actually control that. And for me, I think that applies a lot of different ways. It could be, like I said, with food. It could be, I'm just feeling tired and I don't really want to go work out or go for a run today, but I'm going to force myself to do it. I don't have a specific use case in mind for this, but I can totally get on board with the benefit of practicing this regularly.
Yeah.
One of the ways that she talks about people being able to do this is through the act of referring to oneself in a third person, or Iliism. And one way of doing this is to create an alter ego. And David Goggins has one. He calls it Goggins. So he'll refer to Goggins when you're talking to him, and it sounds kind of weird. But she shared some other examples, which I thought were kind of cool. Beyonce has one called Sasha Fierce, which is her stage personality. And it was her way of overcoming her own personality when she was nervous to perform. Kobe Bryant had one where he referred to it as the Black Mamba, right? And I like the way that she explained this, because I've heard, different versions of this sort of thing in the past. And it always kind of seemed halfway between this person is delusional and maybe they're possessed.
Yeah, yes.
The way that they referred to it. But the way that Polina was describing it in this book, it's recognizing that your default personality is not going to embrace some of these hard things that are worth doing. And so by changing your identity a little bit, you can make it easier to do that, because the Black Mamba has hit the game-winning shot so many times. So when Kobe Bryant is sitting in the timeout and they're drawing up the play, he can say, "Get me the ball," because he's been there before, even if it feels like that wasn't actually him that was doing it. We've all kind of been in those situations probably where we were pushed beyond our limits and we did things we didn't think we could do. That's the picture I get with these alter egos.
Yeah. And this is where I think she could have done a little bit of a better job tying this whole chapter together. It felt like a couple different pieces that weren't tied together, or I didn't tie it together. Like I didn't listen to her tie it together well enough. Like I got distracted during that point when I was reading it. But you get this idea of listening versus talking to yourself, self-distraction, and then the identity piece. And I think these are the 3 core things that like really, really tie together. So she has a James Clear reference that says your current behaviors are simply a reflection of your current identity. Well, okay, so if we think about that, right, my current behaviors are a reflection of my current identity. So I've heard you talk about this before of like, I am a runner. So what do runners do? Runners run. So therefore, like my behaviors, running, is tied to my identity. I'm a runner, right? Like so, and we do this all over the place. Like I'm a father, I am a professor, I am whatever it might be. So therefore, my behaviors tie into that. Well, when my behaviors don't tie into that the way I want them to, then there's this idea of self-distancing. Well, if I self-distance and I create this alter ego, or I create this other thing that says, this is the behavior I want to have. No, sorry. This is the identity I want to have, which then would lead to these other behaviors. That self-distancing allows me to do that. So for instance, Beyonce, I want to go on stage and just command the stage, but my current identity does not lead me to do that. So what do? I create this self-distanced, alter ego that then is allowed or enables me to go on stage and command that stage. And the way that is enacted, I think, is a lot of times by talking to yourself, right? Like, so who am I? Like, I just switched into, Kobe Bryant. I just switched into Black Mamba mode. So what am I going to do? I'm going to go out there and I'm going to own the court, right? And I'm going to absolutely own the court. I'm going to hit the game winning shot. I'm going to do all those things. Would Kobe Bryant do those things? Maybe not. Would Black Mamba? Yes. Like, without a doubt, 100%. And it's like, when you put those three pieces together, this is like a really interesting framework, or a really interesting, system, for lack of a better word, to encourage yourself to do things that you wouldn't normally do. And then how does that turn into the next point she brings up in this chapter of this idea of like metamorphosis? Like, okay, so now we're going to actually change my identity. We're going to change who I am. And then she says about Beyonce being able to drop the Sasha Fierce at some point where it's like, oh, I didn't need her anymore. Like that alter ego went away. And now this is just who I am. Like, I go out there and I run the show. Like, I control, the stage, and it's my show and it's my concert, and I'm going to just captivate the audience. And it's like, wow, I could actually see that being an effective thing. My challenge with this, as I think about like doing this, it's like, well, what the heck do I want that like identity to be? Right. Like, so therefore, like, I lose it on the, well, what identity do I want it to be? And then how do I alter ego down to behaviors and talk to myself? And it's like, whoa, it's like all that gets a little jumbled in my head, but I like the framework. Like, I like the system.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know exactly what it would look like for me either. And maybe that means I don't necessarily need it, but I don't think it needs to be like a crazy thing. Like one of the ways I could see this being played out is if you're an author and you've got a pen name. That's another identity that you're publishing under. People are familiar with that person. And it could be just a way for sharing things that you have trouble verbalizing in your everyday identity. I don't know. I can see value in flipping that switch and being like, oh, well, Mike is this way. And I hesitate to even say this because I've done hard things for long enough that I've seen my preferences change. I was the one who never wanted to be on the stage, and then I started doing podcasts and then webinars and then public speaking. And I realized that, holy cow, while this is still terrifying, it's also very rewarding.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But if you're trying to get to that point, and you're wrestling with this story that you're telling yourself, well, I'm just this shy, quiet, whatever. Embracing an alter ego is a quick way to, I don't have to act that way.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think we're going to transition into chapter 3.
Let's do it.
But like, this is where the book is a little bit strange to me, because I'm used to books having like a thread that ties one section to the other. But like the thread here is mainly just like it's like a 2-sentence thing at the end of every chapter that says, and now if you've thought about mental toughness, let's move into healthy relationships. And you're like, wait, like what? like creativity, mental toughness, unlocking healthy relationships. Like, yes, this is a good thing. We should be thinking about this, but it really had nothing to do with creativity or mental toughness. So I think this is one of those things that caught me off guard. And I had to like think about that tagline of the book and be like, no, we're just talking about principles here. And every chapter is going to be a principle, and we don't have to weave them together super well.
Yeah. It does feel a little bit weird that they aren't woven together, but I'm also not sure how you would do that.
Agreed.
And I don't think it's necessary. I mean, see the last episode where we kind of had issues with where they tried to do that forcefully. But yeah, unlocking healthy relationships is kind of weird following mastering mental toughness. Maybe just because you don't, I don't know, David Goggins to now for something completely different.
Yeah, yep, exactly. Exactly.
But let's just tackle the content of this chapter. I do think it's actually really good. One of the things that she talks about in this chapter is the trust battery, where when you enter into a personal or a professional relationship with someone, visualizing the trust that you have with that person as being roughly 50%. And then every interaction, either charging or discharging that battery a little bit. I had never thought about this in terms of a battery, but it definitely reminded me of an idea from, I think it was Stephen Covey in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, the relational bank account, where you are either making deposits or withdrawals all the time. And the other thing with the battery metaphor was it reminded me of an article / podcast that I came across by Michael Hyatt a long time ago in terms of emotional intelligence and working with other people, saying don't hire people unless the batteries are included. So it's a little bit different approach here, but essentially his point was there are 2 types of people when it comes to work teams: the ones where you feel like you're dragging them along all the time and they're life taking, or the ones who are go-getters and they're a joy to work with and they're life giving. So they either have their own energy source or they don't, in the words of that blog post by Michael Hyatt. And this was several years ago, so I'm not even sure if this blog post is still on the web. I'll see if I can find it, put it in the show notes if it's there. But all of these things are bouncing around in my brain as I go through this. And then she mentions the ratio, the 5-to-1 ratio, where happy couples have 5 positive interactions for each negative interaction. I don't have a specific action item associated with this, but I have to admit that I am thinking about this, and not in terms of, well, what am I getting, but what am I giving?
Yeah.
When my wife has an interaction with me, is it a positive one or is it a negative one? And that's kind of spilling over into other relationships as well. I'm not necessarily keeping score. That could be a valid action item. I don't really want to do that, though. I just want to be aware of this. And I want to do my part in terms of the interactions that I have with other people. I can't control what other people are going to do or what other people are going to say, but I can control how I make somebody else feel. And if I'm in control of that, then there's the chance of me getting thrown off and upset by something small, because when that stuff happens, I tend to brew on it and it just kind of permeates everything. That's what I want to avoid. And I feel like by controlling what I can control and trying to make a positive interaction for somebody else, I'm significantly and exponentially increasing the likelihood of that interaction being positive for me as well.
The 5-to-1 ratio was definitely something that stood out to me. And I've thought about that multiple times since I read it. The other one was the bids. And bids are random requests for connection made throughout the day. And I was like, oh my goodness, I see this all the time, right? I see where somebody throws that thing out there and it isn't intense. It isn't like, what am I trying to say? Like grandiose, or I don't know what word. Like, it's not this huge thing. It's more a matter of, I want to talk to you and connect with you. Are you going to respond to me about this thing, right? Like, are you going to engage with me about this thing? And this is one of those things that I tie into the problem with cell phones and social media and our distraction is like, I think people throw these bids out all the time, but we're too distracted by other things that we don't acknowledge the bid and engage. Where before we used to acknowledge the bid and engage. Why? Because we weren't distracted 24 hours a day. Like it's like, oh yeah, okay. Like I'll entertain this thing. And I think it's a potential area where emotional connection is not happening. It's not being achieved where it was before. Like it was before we had, so many distractions. So that was another big one I took away from this. The last one I took away from this chapter was the Charlie Munger's invert, always invert. Where you flip the problem by asking what would ruin or be the worst action for this thing, right? And I think about this one from like a work or a family standpoint. It's like, okay, instead of thinking what would the best trip to whatever mountain town be, and it's like, okay, that's an idea. And then what would be the worst experience? How do we avoid the worst experience? For that trip. I really like that always invert idea.
Yeah, I like the trust formula that she has, where trust equals consistency plus time. And she hits on the fact that both negative and positive actions compound to build or destroy trust. And the more consistent the action is, the faster the compounding. I don't have anything specific associated with that, but it definitely has my wheels turning.
Yeah, this chapter, they've all been good so far, but this chapter was the one that like really kind of sunk in. It's the one I remember probably the most out of the book.
Nice. All right, ready for chapter 4?
I am.
All right. Chapter 4 is telling better stories. This one I think I probably expected a little bit sooner based off of the introduction. But I don't think that there's a whole lot in here that was life-changing either. My big takeaway from this is that we are all unreliable narrators of our own lives. And there are three sides to every story, which I never thought about it this way, but there's your side, there's my side, and then there's the truth. So typically you would think about that as there are two sides to every story as a way to think about what does the other person think about this. But by framing it this way, there are three sides to every story. Essentially what you're saying is that even when you compare notes, my perspective and your perspective, each of those is going to be colored in some way, and it's not going to be the canonical, truthful version of what actually happened. So I think that's valuable. Again, not necessarily an action item associated with it, but just recognize that because I have my own version of the story, I'm telling myself this is what happened. That doesn't mean that that's actually what happened. And I know this, one of my favorite quotes by Ed Cole is that we tend to judge others by their actions and ourselves by our intentions. So what does that mean? It means that if I do something jerky to Cory, I feel like, well, he understands that I didn't mean to do that. And he's actually thinking Mike's a jerk because he did this and he knows that I hate this. But if we're flip-flopped, then it would be the other way around. I wouldn't be thinking about, well, what did Cory actually intend to do? And you can, flip these scripts, but that's just kind of the default pathways in our brains. So yeah, just recognizing that there are multiple versions to what's going in or what actually happened. And then when there is uncertainty, we tend to fill in the blanks with things that are terrifying instead of positive. Yep. I used to think that, maybe you are generally more positive, optimistic, or generally more negative or pessimistic. And because my brain would always fill in those blanks with the negative stuff, therefore I was a pessimistic individual. I actually think that's not really the case anymore. I think she's right that even if you are an optimist, there is an element of this. Maybe I'm wrong, and you can add some more context to this. Do you consider yourself to be generally optimistic or pessimistic, Cory?
Oh, I'm optimistic. Yeah, I'm optimistic. And then the other one I would put in there is realistic. So it's like there's optimistic, there's pessimistic, and then there's realistic, right? Where I tend to be more on the optimistic side. My wife would tend to be on the more realistic side. So she's definitely very optimistic, but she leans way more realistic than I do. Like I like to get out there and be like, what if? And she's like, no, Cory, that's just not going to work.
Do you still struggle with this? Do you fill in the blanks with terrifying things, or is that just not something that you deal with?
No, I don't fill in blanks with terrifying things because I've done enough work now to know that, like, if I just don't know something, I just let it sit there as a black box and say, I don't know this. We'd have to find more information out about this before we would make any kind of decision.
Okay. Well, maybe I am a little bit more pessimistic than I don't know.
Yeah. All right. So we're gonna do this chapter fast because there weren't a huge number of takeaways for me on this one, but I did get an action item out of this one. And it was the exercise where she starts it as try this exercise. So start with a blank sheet, write about a situation that's making you anxious from your perspective. And the word anxious there isn't relevant to me, but it's like something that's you're thinking about, something that's bothering you, something that's on your mind, right? Like, so write it out from your perspective and then write about it from someone else's perspective or a different character in the situation. So, I could think about it in a bunch of different ways. There's a bunch of different contexts for this, but I want to try this once and see what comes out of it. Like, okay, here's this thing. I'm thinking about it a lot. It's really on my mind. How is so-and-so thinking about it? Are they even thinking about it? Like it may just be a blip on their radar. And I want to see what it does to my own perspective of it. So basically tell the story from another perspective. And I want to see how that goes.
Nice. I like that. All right. The 5th chapter is becoming a more effective leader. And to be honest, I don't think that I want to talk a whole lot about the stuff that's in this chapter because this is a really big topic and it's a surface level discussion of some real important leadership stuff. The big takeaways for me from this are to make new mistakes every day. Don't just make the same ones over and over, which I guess in a weird way, I need permission to do that.
Okay. Yeah.
Starting a creator business, I put a lot of pressure on myself. Got to make this work. And I feel like there's not really room for error. I feel like any mistake that I make could very negatively impact not just the business, but also my family. So this framing is kind of like, well, you're going to make mistakes. So just make different mistakes.
Yeah.
So it's a different way of thinking about it. It takes a little bit of the pressure off, I think. And then there's also a big emphasis in here about systems, which obviously I like. Focus on the system, not the outcome. We've heard different versions of that in different books that we've read. But essentially what that means is you can't judge whether a system is working or not working simply by an isolated outcome. One of the things that stands out to me as an example, not from this book, but from Grit, I think, about making good decisions was when Pete Carroll, the coach of the Seattle Seahawks, decided to go for it on 4th down in the Super Bowl. And they threw a pass and it was picked off as opposed to running the ball. And you can look at the outcome and be like, well, obviously that was the wrong decision. But you can always look at the outcome and say, well, maybe that was the wrong decision. Based on the percentages, all the analytics would say that was the right decision. It just wasn't the right outcome. So disconnecting those two, I think, is important. And then always understand the system of how you got where you are. I don't know exactly how you do this. I think it's an important encouragement to be considering that. But again, I don't think it's necessarily simple. There's a lot of depth to that statement, but it's something that I want to keep in mind. And then the very last thing, this is all kind of related in my head, but there's a quote from Nick Saban: "Don't look at the scoreboard, play the next play."
Yeah.
I think that is a very good encouragement, especially when you're trying to do something big. You can get paralyzed by how big something is. And I've been in that place myself where it's hard to wake up in the morning and do the thing because it just feels like such a monumental, heavy lift. But when you break it down and you are just focused on run the next play, that feels a lot more feasible.
Yeah, this is probably the chapter that I was left wanting. Like I was like, I just want more. I just want more. I just want more. Not that what's in here is bad or not good, but it's more a matter of just there's so much here to talk about. It's such a deep and wide topic, right? I mean, leadership is all over the place. But the main takeaway that I got out of here is that leaders should invert the pyramid and try to be the very bottom. And I was like, wow, that's a really interesting way to think about that. It's like you aren't trying to be the top, the pinnacle, the ideal, person in the organization. Mm-hmm. You're basically trying to be the person who enables everything else to get done, and gives everyone else the ability to do their job better. And then there's another saying in here where like the best leaders are those that become invisible. And it's like, man, like what a counterintuitive way to think about leadership, because that's not what you see in the media. That's not what you see anywhere else. It's like, oh, this person's out there and they're loud and they're doing this thing and they're doing that thing. And it's like, but there's a lot of there's a lot of leaders who practice this leadership where it's like, my whole job is to just make you be the best that you can be or help you be the best that you can be. And then enable all of that stuff. And I'm like, man, what a good way to think about leadership is. It's a very, she ties it into servant leadership and the idea of servant leadership, but just this take the focus off myself and put it more on you all and the people that I am leading and how can I enable them to be the best that they can be. So I think that was my big takeaway. I was underwhelmed by the systems discussion. Like, no, I liked that it was there. I really, was excited that it was there. And I think that's definitely the mindset to have. But man, I just wanted more. Like I just wanted so much more on the, practical nature of it. But I don't think that's the nature of this book. Like I don't think she was trying to be, give us all the practical stuff out of it. But that's what I wanted. Like when I was reading it, I was like, oh, more on the systems.
Yeah, we'll have to read a systems book together at some point.
Yeah.
Interesting to hear you talk about the inverted pyramid. I jotted that down in my notes, but it didn't really hit me, I think because I had read a different version of this a long time ago within the 5 Levels of Leadership by John Maxwell. And that did hit me when I read it, because essentially that was saying that the higher you go in the pyramid, the less it's about you and the more it's about the people that you're helping, people that you're serving, which was a radical idea to me at the time, because you tend to think of like the leaders being the people at the top of the pyramid, and they've earned the right to demand all these things from the people that are following them. And he was basically saying like, no, the more that you ascend that pyramid, the less selfish you can afford to be, and the more it's about the people that you're serving. So I guess if you're interested in that topic and want to go deeper, 5 Levels of Leadership by John Maxwell is a great next step.
And the other one, which I know you've read and I haven't read it yet, but Leaders Eat Last, right? Like how would that tie into this concept?
That's a good question. I read that book a long time ago, so I'm a little bit fuzzy on all the details without pulling up the notes in front of me. I do remember the big idea being there, that the story from that book essentially was they've got these mess halls in the Army or the Air Force, and the higher up you were in the food chain, the longer you waited to eat. Everyone ate before you, hence the name of the book, Leaders Eat Last. So I think there's probably a lot of parallels there. But John Maxwell just has a great way of creating these frameworks that help you understand things.
Yeah.
So Simon Sinek's book was really good. It was one of my favorite books that I've ever read. Some of those stories still stick with me, including the one about how we arrived at the divisive political atmosphere that we find ourselves in. Yep. He actually traces it back to this decision that Newt Gingrich made in like 1990 or something, where they changed a rule that allowed Republicans and Democrats to go back to their home districts during the week. Before that, everybody lived in the same neighborhoods. Their kids went to the same schools. So you humanize the other side. Now it's very us against them, very tribal. So
interesting.
Yeah, I think it's probably a different perspective on a lot of the same stuff, same ideas. All right, let's talk about taking risks. So this is chapter 6, taking risks in times of uncertainty. And the idea behind this one, I think, is that we tend to make a big deal of things. At least that was the message that I heard. Our anxiety elevates whenever we see a problem as a life or death situation that needs to be solved. And that's kind of like the fight versus flight scenario that you probably heard described a million different times. The problem is that we feel that when we're in a meeting in the conference room, as opposed to being out in the savannah and hearing a saber-toothed tiger behind the bush.
Yes.
So our brain can't differentiate between those. And I think that there's a big encouragement to maybe just chill a little bit, but then also like make a decision. One of the big things that I jotted down from this, a quote by Tony Schneider: make reversible decisions quickly and irreversible ones deliberately. I've heard that framed before. Again, you can go deeper on any of these topics. There's books written on all of this stuff, but I like that framing of a reversible versus irreversible decision. I kind of heard it described before as like a door that you would go through, and if it locks from the other side, then you got to be a little bit more careful about it. Yeah. But I tend to just overthink everything before I even go through the door. So it's helpful to me to think about, is this a reversible decision? Oh, it is? Well, no big deal then. Just make a decision and do something, which I've done enough reading about business operating systems and business strategy, that this is the thing that paralyzes a lot of businesses. It's not that they make wrong decisions. It's that they take so stinking long to make any decision. Yep. And then once they make the decision, there's new information. Oh, let's get back together. Let's have another meeting because it's different now. And you arrive at the same decision and you've just wasted a week of everybody's time. Just do the thing.
Yeah, just do the thing. Is it reversible? Just do the thing. Yeah. And that ties into Housel's aspects of risk, right? What are the odds you get hit? What is the consequence of getting hit? And then what's the tail end of consequence of getting hit? And it's like, okay. And getting hit in this situation is like the bad thing happened. So it's like, what are the odds the bad thing's going to happen? What is the average expectation? Which if you've done any kind of risk work, any kind of risk analysis, this is the way you think about it, is like, what's the probability of the bad thing happening? And then what's the impact of the bad thing happening? And that's, I mean, really all you're doing in risk analysis. I liked Franklin Chang Diaz's quote here, take small risks frequently rather than huge risks seldom. So I like that idea. And I like to think about that. It's like, okay, how do I take this risky thing and break it down into smaller risks that I can reassess and I can reassess and I can reassess. So it's like, oh, okay, well, I could do this and then do this and then do this. And if at any point I decide we're going to bail, we're going to pull the ripcord on that. I like that way of thinking about it. That's kind of what I took out of there, is the smaller risks more often will put me in a better place than, all right, we're just going to punt. Like, we're just going to sell the house and move to, London and blah, 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 blah. It's like, no. Like, let's explore some things. I heard somebody else talking about, on a podcast, about people who make job transitions. And before you make those crazy job transitions, why don't you try it out first, right? Or go talk to a bunch of people, shadow people. And I think about this from advising and counseling students who are going to go into the job market. And it's like, well, go interview a bunch of people that are going to do the job you think you want to do, or go intern there, or just try to shadow somebody for, a couple days to see if you even like that idea. And it's like, those are small risks, because what are you risking? You're risking time. You're risking attention. You're risking time versus, okay, I'm going to go get that job and then realize I don't like it. And now 6 months in, I got to do a whole nother shuffle and possibly move. And so I like that idea. My long-winded thing is that I like that idea of the small risks frequently rather than the big ones seldomly.
I like that too. And kind of along those same lines, towards the end, she mentions that you're a master when you think you know nothing. Kind of reminds me of, is it the Dunning-Kruger effect, where you've got that chart where you think you're really smart, and then immediately after that, you think you know nothing, and then it slowly, like, you build up that confidence over time as you continue to go and learn things. And along those same lines, if your experiment works perfectly, then you've learned nothing. So failure is not the worst thing. At least you learn something. In fact, if you do an experiment and it works perfectly, what was the point of the experiment? So,
yeah. Well, and there was a tie back to something you say quite a bit, where this dress rehearse catastrophic events. I won't go as far as that, but it's like thinking about what's the worst case scenario in this situation.
Yeah.
So we go and we try this thing, and if everything goes wrong, what does that look like? Like, what does that mean? Oh, well, this would have to happen, and this would have to happen, and this would have to happen. And I remember you talking about doing this when you quit the day job and
fear setting. Yeah.
Yeah, the fear setting exercise. I couldn't think of it. Thank you. But it's like, I love that idea. It's like, okay, what's the worst that happens? And most of the time, the worst that happens is like, I'm inconvenienced and slightly annoyed. And it's like, well, that's not that bad, right? Like, right. Okay, that's really not that bad. We can figure it out from there.
All right. The next one is clarify your thinking. And the big thing from this, for me, is the soldier versus scout mindset, where the soldier mindset is, I'm going to go learn about this, but I am doing so through a perspective of a motivated mindset, reasoning to defend one particular side because I want that side to win. Whereas a scout mindset is seeing what's actually there as accurately as you can, even if it's not pleasant. So seeing things the way that they actually are instead of through rose-colored glasses, I guess. And I'm kind of curious, I have my pessimistic approach to this. You're the optimist. What do you think about this soldier versus scout mindset, and how do you see this playing out?
I was a huge fan of this separation, right? Like, so clarifying your thinking is the title of the chapter. And I think this is a really good way to be smart about the way you approach situations. So there are situations, and I don't think it's a one or another always. I think it's you use them strategically. Like, there are situations where I'm going to walk in and I'm in scout mode. I don't have a stake in this battle. I'm just going to go in there and just assess the land and see where everybody's at, and then I'll make my decision, when I need to make my decision. And then there are times when it's like, no, I'm a motivated player and I want a certain result to happen out of the situation. And I think thinking about these two different perspectives or views on the world and how do you use them strategically, I think that's a whole fun conversation that you could have. It's like, okay, how do I go into this situation? But I think that leans then into coaching, right? Like, okay, now you have a coach and you say, all right, this is the scenario. I'm going to go into it in scout mode. What would that look like? And then you run through the scenarios of like what it would look like to go into scout mode. Here's another scenario. I'm going to go into soldier mode. And, like, oh, okay, so this is the way you could probably make your tie into there, I liked this framework a lot.
Yeah, I think it's a useful framework. I think the big thing for me to take away from this, because I generally don't want to be wrong, but I also recognize that you're going to be wrong frequently. So I guess this kind of gets into growth versus fixed mindset, where a growth mindset is willing to change their mind about things in order to overcome the obstacle, whereas a fixed mindset is going to fight to protect a specific worldview and everything that's a threat against that. Kind of feels a little bit like the picture I get with a fixed mindset is sort of conspiracy theory, where I have this version of truth and I don't want anyone to tell me otherwise. And so I'll just make up these stories. And yeah, make up is a strong word, but I think it's probably pretty accurate, to support the reality in my head, as opposed to being willing to change my mind about stuff. I have this framing for my life of being in permanent beta, where you're constantly being willing to rewrite things and take things away, add other things. Nothing is really set in stone. Nothing is really released. And she says in this chapter that changing your mind is a feature, not a bug. I really liked that specific phrase. Also, Daniel Borstein was one of the quotes that I jotted down here. The greatest obstacle to discovery is not ignorance. It is the illusion of knowledge. And obviously that has me thinking about where are all the things where I think I know things and I actually don't have an answer to that, but something I'll brew on.
I had the exact same thought, and I flagged the exact same quote, because it was like, it's a big difference between undergraduate and graduate school, right? Is when you're an undergraduate, you're learning all this new stuff, but a lot of it's new, and like you're experiencing it for the first time. And then when you get into graduate school, like you think you know a lot, and like the whole like first, I don't know, it depends on the person, but the whole first like 6, 12, 18 months is really just teaching you like everything you don't know. And it's like, okay, like here are all the other ways to think about that same thing. And we're not going to tell you necessarily the right way to think about it. We're just going to show you all the different ways that people think about it. And then like, we'll give you our perspective, or we'll give you our opinion on it if you ask, but really it's just looking at all the different ways to think about that. And it really ties in this idea of like the illusion of knowledge and the illusion of, oh wow, I really knew what that was. And I like that. Like, I like that way of thinking about it, because it really makes you check and recheck and check and recheck. And I think that makes you stronger going out on the other side. The whole latter part of this section tied into this idea of social norms and conformism and those type of things. And my big takeaway from that was really like how easy it is to, one, think the thing I want to think because there's a group of people out there who also think that thing, right? Like, welcome to the problem of the internet, right? Like, oh, I want to think this thing. So what do? I go and find all the resources that tell me that I'm right. Okay,
Yeah.
like that's a problem. But then there's also the sneaky, like the more sneaky way where you watch a series of videos or TikToks, or you read a series of articles, and they kind of start to get that, oh well, that's a decent idea, or I kind of like that idea, or that idea resonates with me. So then you click on the links there, and it keeps going and it keeps going and it keeps going, but you never break out to then think about other perspectives on it. And you never break out to think about like, well, what are the other 10 plausible arguments for this thing? It's like there are 10 other plausible arguments, but I really like this one. And I've been reading about that one for 4 weeks, right? And I've been watching videos on that one for 4 weeks. It's like, hold on, pump the brakes, But I think this is where it's really hard to do that on our own. And we have to really like have a team of people. And I tie this into like your mastermind group, or there are these groups of people that you get together with that are very different from you, but like everybody has the same goal of being better than they were, the day before. So you come in and like you're talking about a topic, and somebody's like, well, did you think about it from this perspective? And you're like, dang, I didn't think about it from that perspective. I'm just going to go stew on that for a little while. And it may not change. It may strengthen. It may, it may not change anything, or it may change everything. And it's like, man, that's why I think surrounding yourself with, I'm going to say it this way just for the sake of time, the right people, like surrounding yourself with the right people who are going to encourage you to think clearly and to think in ways that edify everyone. Man, I think that's just so valuable. And I think we underestimate that.
Well, that is probably the right place to go into the next chapter. Speaking of surrounding yourself with the right people.
Wow. Didn't even do that. Didn't even knowingly do that.
Nice segue. So chapter 8 is building an engaged community. And this one, I appreciated this chapter, but to be honest, it was a little bit weird being in the book, I thought, because it seems very specific. Now, it's relevant to me because I am trying to build an online community. But that's kind of the framing for everything that's in this chapter, is building an online community.
I agree.
So the big idea is there's a difference between solitude and loneliness. Solitude actually helps us regulate our emotions, but loneliness will just dull them. And loneliness is perceived social isolation, the gap between what you want your social relationships to be like and how you perceive them to be. That, I think, drives a lot of people to find communities online. She talks about the difference between a community and an audience. An audience is a group of people who may be interested in the content that you produce, but a community is like-minded people who are driven by a mutual purpose or interest. And I think what you were talking about with surrounding yourself with the right people, those are people who are driven by mutual purpose or interest, the mutual purpose or interest being personal development, growth-minded individuals who want to make the most of the resources that they have to work with. It's not to necessarily to achieve a specific outcome. We're not all trying to become millionaires. We're not all trying to grow our companies to a certain size. What we do for a living, where we live, that could all be very, very different. But the beautiful thing about these online communities, I feel, is like you can get around the people who have that perspective and are going to encourage you to become the best version of yourself. That is 100% what I am trying to do with the library, which happens to be my online community. And I've struggled with this. Like, what is the library? Who is it? Who is it for? And I guess as I think about that, really it is just these people who have a growth mindset and are trying to make sense of all of these things. One of the phrases that she used in this chapter was to create an environment that facilitates falling into intellectual rabbit holes. And I was like, yes, that's the perfect description. Like, we're all just trying to learn here. We're trying to make sense of the information and apply it to our lives in a way that is actually useful. So I don't really have anything specific that I'm going to do from this. I do think that there are other books and resources that speak more directly, yet again, to how do you actually build a good online community. But there is some good stuff here. And the big takeaway essentially is that the bedrock of community building is forming an emotional connection with your members. Again, I had heard this before, but it was a good reminder. when I'm trying to build my community, when I'm trying to build the library, the thing I should be doing is not trying to get a message out and have a certain number of people read it, but how can I really just provide those moments for people where they're just over the moon because I went out of my way to do something specific for them. Do the things that don't scale, I guess, is another way to say it, with the intention of eliminating loneliness.
Yeah, I think this chapter comes into what is your definition of successful? And I think that really ties into like, and I'm not trying to say, I understand Polina's definition of successful. I'm saying like, you can write this chapter a bunch of different ways. This chapter was written from the perspective of like large audience, big community, very highly engaged community. And that's by the examples that she gave, right? Like, so, I mean, the examples that she gave were, multi-million people communities, right? Like, I mean, they're huge communities and people that are incredibly like popular and successful and all those things. But I don't think that is everyone's definition of a successful community. Like my successful community might be the 40 or 50 people I engage with every week, right? And am I developing that community well? And is it what I want it to be in terms of my success? That said, I think all of the stuff she talked about still applies. The audience versus community, I really like the difference between there. So as somebody who's dabbled around creating stuff on the internet, it's like, oh man, that's a really good distinction between the two. And what do I want? Do I want an audience or do I want a community? Because these are two very different things. And my interaction with them is very different. Like my engagement with those two groups is very, very different. I think the 3 points she lays out for building a community from scratch: overserve, build goodwill, and then create moments of serendipity. Man, I think those are true no matter what you're doing. Like, I think those are really, really strong. It's like, oh, they went above and beyond. Oh man, like I'm really connected with that person. And then, wow, that was surprising and really cool, right? Like, I think if you can do those 3 things, you're probably going to serve your audience and your community really, really well. And I think about the creators that like I follow, and it's like they do those 3 things. Some of them do certain ones better than other ones, but they all do that. So I think this shed a little bit more light into the people and the communities and her little bit of an understanding of what success looks like. And I think this is where it might distance itself from the reader a little bit, depending on what your definition of success is and how that relates to community.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. All right, let's talk about chapter 9. I've been wanting to talk about this one for a long time.
I loved it.
Chapter 9 is optimizing your content diet, which, again, like this could probably be the whole conversation. I know there's a book, Rachel read it, called The Information Diet, and the cover looks like one of those nutritional labels.
Okay.
And she really liked it. I haven't read it yet, but I think it's a topic we maybe should dive a little bit deeper into. We don't have time to get into it too in depth here, but I like this idea of thinking about the information that you're consuming in terms of quality nutrition. Is this the vegetables? Is this meat and potatoes? Is this junk food?
Yep.
And I think that's the big takeaway. Like that's the action item, is to do a content audit and to think about what is the nutritional value? What are the things that I'm consuming, the information that I'm consuming? What is it doing in my life? Said a different way, Jim Rohn had these 3 questions, which I liked. Who am I allowing to speak into my life? Yep. What effect is that having on me? And is that okay? So essentially you have the ability to change who you're allowing to speak into your life. And I really just want people to think about that. She talks about how the mind is our mental hardware, but our beliefs are our mental software. And those beliefs are directly created by the information that we consume. So, it's important, and it's something that we don't think enough about. Case in point being one of the statistics that she shared is that people check their phones 344 times per day or once every 4 minutes. I've heard different versions of this statistic. And every once in a while I go look, like searching for this stat. And every time I do, I find a web page that's like 2 years old and it's like 189 times or something. So this was like double.
Yeah.
And I was like, whoa, just something we need to pay attention to.
Yeah, I have the least notes on this section, and it was the most meaningful. Like, it was the most.
Yeah.
I just read it, and it's probably because I was so engaged that I took less notes while I was reading it. But I get two action items out of this. The first one is look up the MBSR. So MBSR is mindfulness-based stress reduction.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
I just want to look it up and read about it. Right. I don't think I'm going to do anything with it. I don't know if I'm going to do anything with it, but I want to look it up because it sounded intriguing and interesting, and she didn't talk about it a ton. The next one, though, is like a multi-part. I want to do a content audit. I want to develop a content strategy, and then I want to rearrange my physical environment. Mike, I can tell you right now what I need to do, right? I need to get rid of the TV in our like main room. I need it to go away, right? Because the fact that it's there, I will sit down and watch a dumb movie or a TV show that doesn't matter or anything like that instead of doing something way more productive. I know that I need to rearrange the physical environment, but I also know that that's not going to happen in my house. So it's like, I don't know how to resolve those two different things. And I get why, right? Like during the day, you know, the kids will watch a news show, right? That as part of their homeschool. And it's like the TV being where it is, it makes the most sense. So I need to change my behavior or like not be in that physical environment, you know, in the evening. But man, that's, you know, that ties back into the do something that sucks every day. I got to figure out a way to do that. So, but overall, I mean, absolutely loved chapter 9. Loved chapter 9. I thought it was really, really good. And I would tie that into a hidden genius tip for successful people.
Yeah, 100%. Before we get into chapter 10, I just want to call one other thing here, because she mentions James Clear again and mentions that he has books all over his house. And I feel vindicated because I have physical books and I have a giant bookshelf in my office, which is full. I have an IKEA, what do they call it? The cubes against the other wall with books that is full. We have this tree-shaped bookshelf in our bedroom, which is full. Like, there are books everywhere in our house. We even have them in the windowsill in the living room. In fact, I grabbed a book to take it to London, and I realized that the cover of it, because of where it was in the window, the part that had stuck up higher was like all bleached out from the sun. Like, what happened to this cover? Oh, it's been sitting up in the sun.
You are a publisher's dream, Mike. So I said I would talk about this later, and we're finally to later. I didn't remember it. But David Brooks's theory of maximum taste. And I had never heard of this before, and I think this is a really interesting. Like, basically, what you're doing is help me if I'm wrong. You're setting the upper limit.
I've got the definition here. Yeah. So each person's mind is defined by its upper limit, which is the best content that it habitually consumes and is capable of consuming. This is the argument to read more nonfiction books because it's hard, but it's quality information. Yep. And the more that you do it, the easier it gets. And it does expand your mind, and it increases the maximum taste level is how he would put it.
And I really like the way that's framed. Like, I really think that if you're on a continual basis, remember, habitually, like, it doesn't mean that you don't ever do the other stuff, right? You don't ever watch the silly movie, or you don't ever do the other stuff. But it means, like, if it's the 80-20 rule, right? Like, if 80% of your content is nonfiction books or really thought-provoking fiction books or long-form articles from, you know, trusted sources and places that, you know, you're getting good, high-quality content from, it just has to, it sounds so pretentious, but it's like, it just has to elevate the way you think, you know, in terms of, you just don't get that from watching, you know, slapstick comedy, and you don't get that from watching these, you know, these silly movies, adventure movies and different things. Like, so I just have to think that that's true.
100%. All right. Ready for the last chapter?
I am.
Okay. So chapter 10, discovering your hidden genius. And this is kind of an encapsulation of a lot of the things that she's talked about. The big idea or the story that she really uses as the framing for this chapter is the ship of Theseus. Are you familiar with this story?
I am, yes.
Yeah, so I actually wrote a newsletter about this a long time ago. I've been fascinated by this concept. Essentially, the thought experiment goes, Theseus was the guy from Greek mythology that went to the labyrinth, slew the Minotaur, came back, boat's in the museum, and slowly over time, each piece of the boat wears out and has been replaced. So after a while, none of the pieces are original, and the thought experiment is that still Theseus's ship? And you can apply this to yourself as a human. I've never really dug into the specifics of how quickly which types of cells regenerate, but the general idea is that your cells are replacing themselves all the time. So who you are today is not the person who you were yesterday. And even if you go back further to some point in history, every cell of your body is now different from some point, and different organs, reproduce cells more quickly than others. She shared some specifics, which I thought was kind of interesting. But the big takeaway essentially is that we're always these works in progress. We're always changing, and just an encouragement to embrace that growth mindset, resist the fixed mindset, and try to protect the status quo. And this is the way things are. I guess a different way to frame this would be to develop a curiosity filter, which I really like that word, curiosity. I try to apply that in my own life. I was actually recording Focused earlier today. I was talking to David about this and talking about our media consumption habits, going back to, your content diet. I mentioned when I'm taking notes on books that I read, I'm looking for things that are resonating, things that are like pinging off the inside, the reverberating in my soul. And really what does that mean? It means I'm interested in this thing. I'm curious about it. I want to know more about it. And that really is this last chapter in a nutshell. There is one more thing in here that was inspiring to me, that successful people are willing to bet on themselves. I feel like I'm in the middle of betting on myself. Feels sometimes like it's not going to work. But also, when I read that, it was like, yeah, this is the right path. Yeah. Even if this isn't the right thing, I'm going back to the growth mindset. I want to be willing to say, well, I made a mistake. I'm going to do things differently. I'm going to change things, etc. But the approach is still, I'm not going to try to do things the way that everybody else does them. One of the quotes I jotted down is by Lily Tomlin. If you win the rat race, you're still a rat. I never really thought about it that way, but yeah, it makes sense.
Yep. So this chapter, like you said, is trying to wrap everything up. Right? It's trying to give us like a kind of a take home. Here you go. Like there is a conclusion. The conclusion we'll talk about here in a second, but it's written in a very specific way. This one's trying to wrap it up and trying to like just hit a couple other key points and tie some things together. I can't tell you that I really got anything major out of discovering your hidden genius. I can't even tell you that like I'm going to walk away and go like, oh, I get what hidden genius is in her mind, and I know no, I can't do that. I can say that this book had some interesting ideas and some things that I think I could do better. One of the things she lists as an exercise to do, like, who is the person living my dream life? Well, like my biggest problem with that is like, I don't know what my dream life is. So therefore, if I'm going to know who the person living my dream life is, I got to figure out what my dream life is. And it's like that is the value of this book in my mind. It's like, it isn't the thing she recommends you do. Cause that came from like Kobe Bryant, I think, was like, well, who's the person living your dream? Well, go mimic them and go like figure out what they're doing and try to do that. And my thing is like, it's the deeper level of like, well, have I even thought about like what that is? And what does that mean? And like, how do I do that? You had said about the Lily Tomlin, if you win the rat race, you're still a rat quote. I actually screen grabbed the whole Anna Quinlan's commencement speech, because I think that whole speech, I'm not going to read it here because it's too long, but I think that whole speech is really, really good in terms of like just reframing and rethinking about like just not redoing things, but like being okay with going and getting after it, and like,
Yeah.
set aside old traditions. It's like I just really like, it's kind of like a motivational, like, go out and get them, kind of a thing. So I really like that. But overall, this chapter just felt like all right, let's button some things up in 9 seemingly disparate chapters.
Which I think is really the intention. Let's talk about the conclusion. But the thing about the conclusion is, there's a couple, I guess, ideas associated with this, that success is personal and that overnight success is a myth. But the big takeaway here are 10 key questions that she asks that pertain to each of the topics in the 10 different chapters. So, for example, chapter 1, what is the biggest, boldest, most original endeavor that you can conceive of? Chapter 9, how can you improve your content diet this year? So I think these questions are great. Some of the biggest aha moments I've gotten have been from considering questions like these that you wouldn't normally think about. So I think this is pretty brilliant as you're wrapping up a book like this to ask these questions. Not that you're going to take an entire day and think through all of these and come up with answers to all of these, but maybe there's just one that gets you to think about things in a different way. Therefore, reading the book is worth it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. Like, these are okay, I just talked about a lot of things for 10 chapters. Here are some action items, or here's a way to make it a little bit more tangible as you think through moving forward with this. I would like to tell you that I'm going to go through these 10 and like actually think about them. I think this would be a fun reflection, prompt, like a journal prompting where you get one of these every day for the next 10 days. And I think you'd get some value out of that. I'm not going to do that, but I think that would be a good, useful way to do that. Or if you're reading this book in a group discussion, you talk about these with the group and your answers.
That's true. Yeah, group discussion. I didn't think about that, but that's the perfect application of this.
Yeah. All
right, action items. I've got a couple. You've got a couple. Yeah. I guess I'll go through mine first. It's my book. I want to, as mentioned previously, do something that sucks every day. Yet to be determined what that is. Yep. And then I want to do a content audit. I sort of already did this because David and I were talking about for Focused. And that episode will actually be out before this one. So I'll put a link to that in the show notes. But we talked through our content consumption strategies, our philosophy behind it. So I'm sort of cheating in that I've done this already for another podcast, but definitely was inspired as I was reading chapter 9 for optimizing your content diet from this book. So full credit for the action item goes to this book. How about you?
So I've got 3. I want to think about something that's anxious or bothering, or on my mind, I should say. So thinking about something anxious, bothering, or on my mind. And I want to write about it from somebody else's perspective. So there are a lot of things that I could do this for. So one thing between now and then, I want to do that. I want to look up the mindfulness-based reflection. I forget it's MBSR.
Stress reduction. Yeah, I'd heard that acronym before. I forgot what it meant till you brought it up again. But
yeah, so I want to look that up and just read more about it. And then I do want to do a content audit. I want to do a content audit and then develop a content strategy. I'm not going to commit to rearranging my physical environment, although I'm already kind of doing that because I had to set up. I'm setting up a new office at work, and therefore that is rearranging my physical environment to not be distracted and actually get more work done during the day. So I'm going to already check that one as done. Yes.
There you go.
Yeah.
Getting the hang of it.
All right. Style and rating. It's your turn. Your book.
That is true. All right. So this is a little bit of a different style. As mentioned at the beginning, I personally really liked it. I liked it so much that when I got done, I felt a little bit ripped off because I don't have the book in front of me. I forget how many pages it is. It's kind of your standard self-help length. But like I said, there are lots of pages that just have like a single quote. And I was like, if you hadn't done that, you could have written a longer book.
252, by the way, is the hardcover.
252 doesn't feel like 252
I agree
pages.
completely. I agree completely.
Yeah, which is probably overall a good thing. I mean, it's better to be short than it is to be long, I think, when you're writing about this sort of stuff. However, there was lots of opportunities to go deeper with some of these things. And I'm not saying she should have. I think actually she took the right approach. I think she struck a great balance between telling stories and incorporating her own personal experience into this stuff. The examples that she used were great. There, at this point, I've read enough books and I've heard enough of these stories, familiar with enough of these people, that frequently when stories get told, something goes off and I'm like, that's not quite right. Because the tendency when you're telling stories can be to adapt what happened to fit the narrative you want to tell.
Yeah.
And she did not do that with these. At least that didn't hit me that way. Everything that she was sharing, there was additional information, additional context. It's like, oh, I didn't know that about that story. That's interesting. Now I understand that story a little bit better. So, I don't know. I think the only thing that is kind of holding this book back is kind of what you said, the hidden genius. What exactly does that mean? How do we do that? Why should we do that, etc.? I think if you're just looking for a bookworm style book about bookworm style topics, this is a great one to pick up and read. But I really am struggling for, like, a lot of times I'll pick up a book to solve a problem that I'm facing, or, I want to really master this particular thing. What exactly is that this book is going to solve? I don't think it has that strong hook. I think it's a very entertaining, useful, helpful productivity book that covers a lot of different things, from personal productivity, mental toughness, creative potential, all the way up to some pretty heavy leadership stuff. And just that in alone, being able to speak to those two ends of the self-help market and tie them together is an amazing feat. But when I think about the 5-star books, I think of something that is just like, this is the definitive work on X, and this doesn't get to that. So I think I'm going to rate it 4 stars, but I would absolutely recommend this one to anybody who listens to the Bookworm podcast. And if you want my notes, as I normally do, I'll put them together and put a link in the show notes. But I think this one is worth picking up.
Yeah. I agree with you more. So I'll put the rating first. It's a 4-star book for me. I definitely would recommend people read this one if you're interested in kind of, self-help, productivity, success, like those type of things. I agree that there is not a, like, here is the thread or the takeaway of this book, right? Like, here it is, boom, this is the one thing that you're going to want to get out of this book, I guess. But what I'll tell you is, I think there is something for everyone in this book. Like, if you read it, you're going to walk away with something. And I think that is the sign for a successful book for me. So I like the way you framed it in terms of a 5-star book would be like the go-to, like, okay, if you want to read about this thing, boom, here's this 5-star book, go read about this thing. I think this one is much more of a generalist. If you want to read about success and ways to think about different things that will maybe make you more productive, or, increase, your ability to, do certain things or be successful, here, check this one out. This one seems well written. I think for 252 pages, it flew by. Like, I had no trouble, easily reading this one and staying engaged. And I think this was a really good recommendation. So I'm grateful to you for, finding this one and suggesting it to us. So yeah, overall 4 stars.
Awesome. All right, let's put Hidden Potential on the shelf. What's next, Cory?
All right, so my book is next, and it's called The Ritual Effect: From Habit to Ritual, Harness the Surprising Power of Everyday Actions. This is a book by a guy named Michael Norton. And Michael Norton is a behavioral scientist. I'm trying to remember that exactly what his... Oh, I'm blanking on it right now. But he's a prof, and he's done a bunch of studies. So this is, when you start reading this book, it's going to be based off of, research studies where he started to look at, rituals and what he calls legacy rituals, and then how those converted into more everyday rituals that we develop. I picked this one up because I like the idea of not thinking about like habits, but thinking about systems and rituals and ways that we can trick, I guess is the lack of a better word, or design into our day ways to get ourselves to do the things we want to do, and then turn those into like consistent things. So picking up The Ritual Effect, if you're reading along, we'll talk about that one next. How about you, Mike? What's the book after The Ritual Effect?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I was a little bit hesitant to pick this one, but now knowing that you're interested in the topic, I want to cover A System for Writing by Bob Dotto. We interviewed him for the Focus podcast, and spoiler alert, I like this one. I mean, you listened to the podcast already, so you knew that. No pressure or anything.
I don't feel any pressure at all, but I'm excited to read it. Like you, I actually picked up that episode on purpose because I was like, I want to hear what they have to say about this book, because I think that book looks interesting.
Yeah. So a long time ago, we read a book called How to Take Smart Notes by Sankey Ahrens. And when we first read it, I rated it pretty low. I didn't really care for the book, but it was the one that everybody held up as the book about Zettelkasten that everyone needs to read. And I was kind of disappointed by it. And then I went back and I reread it again later, and I realized that, some of the ideas in here are actually kind of powerful. So maybe I should have rated it a little bit higher. And at one point, Joe and I had a episode, maybe it was like episode 100 or whatever. We could go back and we could change a couple of our ratings. So I bumped it up a little bit, but I've never really liked the book. And I always was like, there's got to be a better Zettelkasten book out there. That's what A System for Writing is. It's about Zettelkasten. Nice. So it'll be a really interesting conversation. I'm curious to hear what you think about the Zettelkasten system, and then also how you might apply elements of that to what you do.
Good.
Got any Gap books?
So I just finished one. Now you're going to say this is cheating, so don't yell at me, right? Like, not that you would yell at me, but don't like ridicule me or whatever. I have been doing more running, and a lot of times I will preview a book while I'm running. So I'll like listen to it. I'll get the audiobook and I'll listen to it and just be like, okay, is this worth my time? Because I'm running anyhow, right? Like I like to listen to something while I'm running. So I'll throw a book in there as I go. So I just finished one that I'm going to count as a Gap book. And it's called Good and Angry. And it's basically thinking about anger and thinking about it in a different way.
Okay.
So Good and Angry was the Gap book. I'm intentionally not choosing a Gap book between now and our next recording because I'm doing some travel and I just won't have a lot of time to read extra during this period of time.
Gotcha.
How about you?
I don't have a Gap book, but I need one because my next book is one that we have covered already. So
fiction.
Well, I'm still working on the Third Body Problem. I did finish The Alchemist, so I have read a fiction book since the last time that we have recorded.
Nice.
I'll continue to work on the Third Body Problem, but also I have this one that I picked up called The Elements of Eloquence, Secrets of the Perfect Turn of Phrase.
Ooh.
This came again by a podcast episode. I was listening to How I Write by David Perel, and I forget the author that he was interviewing, but they were talking about different parts of speech and making writing that was more interesting to read. And this was the book that came up. So I'll grab a link to that. I'll put it in the show notes if people are interested in that. But I'm working on writing things. Figured can't hurt to work on the craft a little bit.
I'm excited. I won't remember to ask you about this book, but I would really love to hear like a report back after you read this book. I'm not going to give away my cards, even though my face probably shows it right now, but I'm very intrigued.
Nice.
For each 39 figures, he explains a well-known hyperbole, paradox, rhetorical question. Interesting. Very interesting.
All right. Well, thank you for listening. If you want to support the show, there is a way that you can do that. Patreon.com/bookwormfm. $7 a month gets you access to a 4K wallpaper, a couple of bonus feeds, including a bootleg feed, which is unedited and gets uploaded as soon as we get done recording, usually about 2 weeks before the show gets released. A pro show, which has an extended ad-free version. So that has an extra segment. Today in the Pro Show, we talked about my trip to London. If you are willing to support the show financially, if you're already doing that, thank you so much. If you're willing to do that, it would really help out a lot. We are just trying to figure out a way to pay the Bookworm bills, and this is the primary way that we can do that. We don't have a ton of ads, so if you get a lot out of Bookworm and would like to support the show, you can do so at patreon.com/bookwormfm. If you are reading along with us, pick up The Ritual Effect by Michael Norton, and we will talk to you in a couple of weeks.